can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have a good friend, Ben Jackson. You can check him out. He runs the Writing Salon. You can check him out at writingsalons.com. Ben, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Some fan favorites, I had the co-founder of Pixar on, the founder of Atari on, the co-founder of RX Bar on, P90X. This one has been one of the hardest interviews to get, and this is out of all the ones I've done, Ben, I've been looking forward to this the most. Okay, so this is a long time coming, so I appreciate you coming on. You can check out more episodes on inspiredinsider.com. This episode is actually brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Ben, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host, so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I am excited to introduce Ben Jackson. He's the owner and executive director of the Writing Salon. And the Writing Salon is a creative writing school for adults and is really a place where people can tell their stories. And their stories that they've always wanted to tell and get out into the universe. And this is all while receiving support and guidance from a welcoming community. Because Ben, you and I know, like sometimes it's hard to sit down and write or do something every single day or on a consistent basis. Accountability is key for these things, and welcoming accountability is better. They just actually celebrated its 25th anniversary, and Ben's taught composition, literature, and creative writing at a wide range of educational institutions and retreat centers, including the University of San Francisco, the Writing Salon, and it's the Esalen Institute. His poetry has actually appeared in multiple journals and magazines like New England Review, Southern Review, Poetry Daily, and he's also earned numerous awards and fellowships from the Torhouse Foundation, Warren Wilson College, Vermont Studio Center. And Ben, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, Jeremy.
I'm excited. Just start off, and there's a video piece to this. So if you're listening to the audio, I'm going to pull up the Writing Salon website as we're talking, but just tell people a little bit more about the Writing Salon and what you do, because there's a lot of different interesting pieces to what you do and offer.
Sure, love to. Thanks for that warm introduction, Jeremy, and looking forward to talking about the Writing Salon. So the Writing Salon, as you mentioned, 25th anniversary. We just actually had a 25th anniversary event 4 weeks ago. It was a blast. So we started in 1999 in San Francisco in the home of Jane Underwood, the founder and director of the Writing Salon. She was an amazing woman. She passed away in 2016. When she passed away, I took over as director and owner. I had been teaching at the Writing Salon since 2012. So when she passed, our community was kind of in a frenzy. We were like, what's going to happen next? What are we going to do? And turns out when I talked to her partner after her passing, he was like, hey, she wanted you to take this on. And so I learned after that I was going to be owner and director of the Writing Salon. So that's a little bit of my story.
The torch was passed. How did you originally find the Writing Salon?
I found it through a woman named Robin Ram, who was a teacher at Warren Wilson College, where I was a student. I met her at a writing residency in Wyoming, Brush Creek, one of those that you mentioned. And we had a great time chatting, and she was like, "Hey, you should, I used to teach at the Writing Salon. Check it out in San Francisco." So I ended up going to the Writing Salon. I got my mom a gift card to take classes there because my mom lives in San Francisco. So I was like, "Hey, mom, before I even go there, I just want to see what happens here. Enjoy class." And so she had an awesome time, and
She was the guinea pig. You're like, go
she was
ahead, try it out for me.
she was part of the entryway. So, but the writing salon, a little bit more about it. If we look back to 1999, I mean, it started from a home. So it's always been about building community from the most intimate environment. Jane Underwood, the founder, would run classes out of, her kitchen, but there are stories about her possibly, running classes out of her bedroom, out of her basement. She was just trying to make it happen. She said she started it on a wing, a prayer, and a shoestring. And, it grew gradually over the years from San Francisco. We got a Berkeley location, so you're looking at it now. If you hover at that 2002 with a timeline, we got that Berkeley location. And so from there, we just, expanded in by word of mouth a lot. People were loving our classes and wanted more. So our community really grew over the years. And we also had this, uh, f- Jane had set up this flyering system throughout San Francisco, these very colorful, like neon flyers, and they were everywhere. And so a lot of people knew about our school without even, kind of recognizing it. They'd be like, "Oh, wait, that's the school that had all
It's
those
like
flyers."
true guerrilla marketing. The
Yes.
flyers are everywhere.
Yeah. So so Jane had set up an amazing and very intimate community of folks up through to 2012. And I target 2012 because around that time, she had cancer, and her cancer started to develop even, worse, and it really impacted her ability to commit, it fully to the school. Although I would say that she never skipped a beat, remarkably. She was a warrior, through to the end. But when I came on in 2012, we would have conversations at times, and I'd say, "Hey, you know what? Do you need a hand with anything? Like, can I'm curious about this stuff. I've always wanted to know more." And so she was interested in kind of letting me in and sharing with me some of the ideas behind how to run a school, even though
So
it was
it sounds like
a,
you took the
yeah.
initiative, and that was one of the reasons she thought, listen, Ben would be a good fit to carry the torch.
It's amazing though. It still came as quite a surprise to me when it happened because Jane ran it alone. So this is one thing that's been remarkable about the school is that Jane ran it alone from 1999 to 2016. And then when I took it on in 2016, I faced a particular challenge in that I wasn't I didn't find that I would excel or that the school would excel if I was doing it alone. I needed a community around me. And I think that was probably one of the best decisions I made or shortly after coming on was to build a team around me that I could trust. One of them was actually my wife, Ada, who was our design director and designed this website for us, which was absolutely needed and probably one of the reasons why we saw a spike in earnings in that year, 2017. We had to do some work to kind of date, not we needed to get current. We needed to find a way to meet our like modern needs, and our website was pretty clunky.
Ben, talk about building a team, right? Because that's super important. I do want to go through kind of the evolution of the services, right?
Yeah,
Because COVID, killed or, not killed, but tried to kill a lot of, in-person stuff, and it did for a while. So I want to hear kind of, I know you pivoted, which probably made the writing salon even stronger. But before we get to that part, just talk about building a team and why was it important for you, and how did you go about doing that?
it's the most important and probably some of the hardest work that I had to do with the writing salon. I want to mention that a team had already been built with our cast of teachers in the community, and so we have all of our teachers are contractors, they're independent contractors, they're not employees. And at any one time, we may have about 30 teachers in our orbit who we're kind of drawing upon, or drawing from to teach classes. And so that's the first community. They have done so much for this organization to prosper. And but when we
That's
looked
where
at
you
staff,
came from. Yeah.
and that's right, yeah. So it's often comes through our teachers. So with staffing, I mean, where did I go eventually with the most, solid community additions that I could make was by staffing from our teachers or teachers' husbands. In the case of our most current operations manager, a longtime teacher, Andy Toohey, fiction, great, writer and teacher here at the Writing Salon. His wife is a poet and works with nonprofits a lot and was a wonderful fit for the Writing Salon. And so she came in within the past 2 years and has been an awesome part of our community. Yeah, so building that team is about, for me, it's about um, understanding like what our what our shared vision is and how we can do it in a way that's fun, efficient, and realistic.
What were you looking for in staffing? Like there were certain positions you had to be like, hey, I need to put these positions in place.
So operations manager there was no question about it that I needed one because I had run operations from 2016 to about 2018, and I recognized that there wasn't much I could do in terms of growth if I were involved in the day-to-day operations. I couldn't do the envisioning that was necessary. And so that was key, number one. And we've had several operations managers. I mean, I didn't strike it perfectly the first few, it was hard. There's a lot of turnover with that kind of position too. It's very admin driven. We don't have a lot of resources at the Reading Salon, so we're often paying below market, and we're in a really competitive market here in the Bay Area where the cost of living is
Yeah, it's
ridiculous.
expensive there.
Yeah, so I had to find a very passionate individual who cared about writing. So all of our operations managers have cared about writing, cared about our community, or came from within our community, and who also had the capacity to understand how to do administrative work, which doesn't come naturally to necessarily to those who haven't had a history of doing it. Like teachers don't have a lot of admin work. Their admin's different. It doesn't really carry over to operations. And writers, I mean, don't necessarily, they have different kind of admin responsibilities.
I feel like an important piece of what you said there, what sticks out to me is there's really a shared values because, I think with anything, but also especially if you're like, listen, we need someone who's passionate. We're on a budget, and especially in San Francisco. I remember some friends telling me the rent there. I'm like, are you insane? That's crazy. Like compared to Chicago. I'm like, that's what you pay, and this is what you get. But there's a shared values there, and someone who's super passionate, and then has the means to do it. I'm curious about the knowledge transfer piece. Like you said, you were doing it for a while. A lot of the business owners I have, sometimes it's hard because it's like, it's just easier if I just do this myself, right? And that inhibits them from getting out of it, but because it takes a lot longer to do that. So how did you eventually get that knowledge transfer or document or however you did it to the next uh person who's going to do operations?
With the utmost patience. Training, I come to this position as a teacher. So I did over time develop incremental approaches to address outcomes, like, in a classroom setting, how are we going to get this writer to, hopefully move beyond fragments or fragmented sentences and write complete sentences? What's the step-by-step process to get that person to this place where they feel comfortable with grammar? in a in our setting at the writing salon with training, it's copious documentation, um, follow-ups, regular follow-ups, where I'll say, hey, let's do a weekly meeting, but even let's do a monthly performance check. And it's not really with that kind of language like performance check, because it could be uncomfortable for an employee to feel like they're getting evaluated all the time. But having them come into a very natural conversation with me and say like, hey, what, and also to invite them to share with me where the struggles are and to allow me to then be in a position where I can say, all right, here's some possibilities if these work for you. I'll make my recommendations, but also invite them to also pursue a roadmap that works for them because I don't want to be prescriptive in my position. However, I do find that I have a certain degree of institutional knowledge, having done this work for 8 years now. But so I do at times when I find that there is a slip, I'll be like, hey, you know what? Let's talk about what I think is really works if we want to achieve. In operations, it's like 99.9% accuracy. You don't have that much room for error.
What are some of the other positions you wanted to put in place? So operations managers seem like Jeremy, it's a no-brainer. I needed to get, in order for me to grow this thing and actually run it the way I want, I need someone handling these pieces. What were some of the other positions that you wanted to put in place?
So earlier on, design director that Ada, my wife, was in was essential because we needed to rebrand in order to grow in 2017, and we needed to build a website. So it was a no-brainer where we said, okay, we need to update our design. We need to get fresh. We have that cool like library lamp in red that people may have seen when you were taking them through the website. So that rebranding really helped us and gave the writing salon a sense of like identity a little bit more. So that's one. And then more currently, education director. Now, this was a hard one for me to let go of because I love the educational component of running this school. I love developing curriculum as well, and I still can do that alongside our education director. But I found that I really needed someone who could be in engagement regularly with our teachers and who could also, when there were conflicts that came up, who could be a guide through those conflicts. And so I tapped Kathy Garlick, a longtime colleague and friend of mine, to be education director. And, we'll have I recognize in that relationship, we'll mark out time to discuss a conflict sometimes for about an hour, and it might be a single conflict. It doesn't sound very efficient, but the value there is that we're both recognizing what our school is all about. We know that our services have to be excellent. And so we're going to continually iron out the pieces and we have a wonderful relationship around that too, around just like what works in the classroom. What do we believe really is effective? And how do we transfer that knowledge to teachers, especially our newest teachers?
But I'm curious because I love thinking about this, which is what's something that's hard to let go because you love it? Because a lot of business owners I talk to, but they know it's going to grow the business. They know you're going to be able to touch more people and lives because of it, but you love it. And it's an essential part of the business. How did you come to terms with it or mentally be like, finally, go, listen, I just need to make the decision? Because you could have easily just kept doing it, right? You love
Yeah.
it, you're good at it. What was that mental leap that you had to make to finally do that? Maybe someone listening it will help them think about it. And I speak for myself too. It'll help me. Certain things I'm like, I love doing this, but I know I need to not do it actually. So
I think I think a lot of it, there is one piece of it is just absolute trust. So, and that trust is you're letting go of your relationship with that particular item. So in my case, it was being kind of responsible for the educational component of the school to a great degree. Like letting go of some of the details of it and just saying, I trust Kathy with all of this, but holding on to the pieces that I really value still. So keeping some of the ones that I'd say were made me feel a sense of kind of attachment in a healthy way with the educational side of the school. So like for instance, scheduling. I found that that was one where I was like, I don't want to let this one go because there's a certain kind of institutional knowledge associated with being able to mark out the most optimal schedule for classes across genres, weighing out all the like variables that come up, including things that are as crazy as COVID or like a cyclone bomb that comes through, right? That I was just talking with Jeremy about, and it's going to shut down our school for a day. And we have to think about how are we going to pivot. So I hold on to some little pieces and let go of a lot of the big ones. And when I let go of them, I make sure I do it in a trusting fashion.
I'm going to get back to building teams for a second, but just this conversation, Ben, makes me think, okay, when you graduated college, okay, what did you want to do? Because you're not thinking, listen, I want to be educational director. I want to like have to pivot a company because there's cyclones coming or because of COVID's coming. And for me, like same thing. Like I went to school to be a chiropractor and now I'm doing podcasts. So when you came out of college, and I remember you in high school, you were always in the AP English classes and everything. But what did you, at that point, high school, college, what did you want to do?
I wanted to be a writer. There was no question about that. And I
What did that
still,
look like for you? Like at the time, when you say writer, that could mean a lot of things. Yeah.
absolutely. A
Yeah.
writer, I mean, a creative writer primarily. A writer of, I had actually two things. I thought about journalism, but I hadn't had the greatest experience with journalism and journalists. If I wanted to go into journalism, I felt like I wanted to do it in a way that was more, sort of in-depth research oriented journalism. Uh, I ended up really leaning toward creative writing when I was in college. It became very clear that that would be the direction for me. I had a class for one with two important classes for me. One was in high school with Jeff White. I don't know if you had a class with Mr. White
No,
in Deerfield High School, but
I was more sciences, the English, not so
yeah.
much. So,
So
yeah.
I had a creative writing class with Jeff White, and that was, mind blowing and opened up a lot. But then in college, I had a class with Lucia Berlin at University of Colorado, and Lucia would go on to achieve posthumous fame, like immense fame after her passing. And but when she was alive, she was relatively unknown. And so from her class, from other classes, I was like, oh, I know this is the path for me. And right after college, I was already committed to writing and teaching. And so my whole path from like upon graduation all the way through till I was a director of the Writing Salon was writing and teaching. And I did both primarily. That was my career path. I still am a writer and teacher. I just can't allocate as many hours towards those pursuits.
Totally. No. So building teams, and I want to talk about Jennifer Lewis too, because you're talking about there's parts of the team, right? Which is the teachers, there's the staff, there's different things. So talk about Jennifer Lewis as an interesting path with the writing salon.
Yeah, I want to offer this path as like a sample of what happens at times, but also what is also extraordinary that can happen at our school. So Jennifer Lewis was a student at San Francisco State, and she ended up taking classes at the Writing Salon. And then over time, uh, she became a teacher at the Writing Salon. I actually reached out to her directly and invited her in. And before she became a teacher, she was leading Red Light Lit, which is they run a event series, and they also are a press. And so she edits works and publications. And so Jennifer had this pathway that came through, student to teacher at the Writing Salon, and then had a lot of success with Red Light Lit. She has a book herself called The New Low that's, pretty fresh, out from Black Lawrence Press. And she's an example of of an extraordinary story, but also this can happen at the Writing Salon where we have students who come through our school, they excel, they're very committed to writing and to the literary, kind of literary world and generally. They want to be pursuing the literary arts, whether it's editing, running event series, and then they go on to publish too. So that's a wonderful story. And Jennifer's a dear teacher. She's been teaching at the Writing Salon for 5 years, and she has a strong following of students as well.
Um, and of course, with building teams, one of my favorite books of all time is your dad's book, 11 Rings, The Soul of Success. So I'd love to hear what you've learned from your dad. I'm talking about Phil Jackson, from building teams. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
master.
I talked about patience earlier. I think that's such an important part of my dad's ingredient in team building was applying a kind of a patient approach, allowing players in his case to flourish over time. One thing that I loved about my dad as a coach was that he didn't yank a guy out when he made a mistake very often. I don't know if you ever noticed that, Jeremy, but he wasn't one of those coaches who would like, you threw the ball away, I'm going to take you out. He like lets that player reflect on the floor and gives them the time to kind of refocus because often what he finds is that just give that individual a little bit longer. I know that person, I have faith in that person. So this is another one. If patience is important, but faith too. I trust that you can pull this around and refocus and play at your optimal level. So I'm going to leave you out there for a little longer. And I like to apply that too. Just, be patient with people, train them as needed, but don't do it in a fashion that makes anyone feel like it's too prescriptive. And then trust, like, show them that you care and that you're not going to be watching over them.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that, but it's not something that I necessarily noticed um, personally. But yeah, the patience, the faith and trust, anything else, I know we were talking before we hit record about some of the things that happen um, on the side, not even on the court, possibly.
Um, Specifically with like my dad or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
on this side, well, my relationship with my dad was there were chapters in my life where I was closest to my dad. And one of those time periods when I was closest to my dad was when way before the NBA. Like, because when he was involved in coaching in the NBA, he was not the most accessible individual outside of the summer times. And but before he became the coach of the Bulls, so we're looking at 87, um, he was coaching in what his friend Charlie Rosen called the Cockroach Basketball League, the CBA. And he's coaching the Albany Patroons. And then we'd go as a family to Puerto Rico and he'd coach summers in Puerto Rico in the league out there. And so what I learned from him was just like ultimate grit, like just believing, being passionate about what you want to do and being up for an adventure with your family to do it too, because we're all like, heading, we're on that journey with him. And it was very exciting. Um, and so I appreciate that a lot about my dad, his willingness for adventure. And also like, he was ambitious in an interesting, like subtle way. Yeah. But incredibly competitive, as you could imagine.
I'm assuming you watched The Last Dance.
I did.
What were I don't know if you remember, what were some of your thoughts? I mean, that brings me back to, I remember, and I was telling you before, I have certain memories, and I've like just spotting memories from growing up. And one of them when we were at your house, and then we actually wanted to play basketball, so we went to the Berto Center at like midnight, and I guess didn't tell my mom that I was staying at your house, and so she called and woke your parents up. I think it was the night before like a very important game, and I'm like, you can't do that, and she's like, I don't care, I need to know where you are or whatever. But I remember the Berto Center, just totally empty, shooting around. Now they have like youth leagues there, so anyone
Oh,
could go there. And I used to play like Sunday mornings until I like sprained my ankle like 12 times. Was playing on Sunday mornings at the Berto Center. But what came up for you? Any memories or thoughts when you saw and watched The Last Dance?
what was so special about watching The Last Dance was showing a part of my childhood and my dad's life to my kids. Actually, it was their one access point. into that time period in the 90s. And then, like Last Dance didn't cover, but they've gotten glimpses of the 2000s with Lakers, but my kids were so excited to watch Grandpa. You
What were
know,
their thoughts? What did they think?
they well, my daughter Maylise is a gymnast and she's like, I want to be famous. And so we kind of had to talk about that. Like, what does that mean? How does one become famous, maybe? And it's sometimes it often is entirely out of your control. So we had interesting conversations about lifelong pursuits and values.
It's sort of like a be careful what you wish for scenario, right? What were
Mhm.
some of the conversations around your thoughts around someone who says, "Oh, I want to be famous"?
I think I'd want to just let her know, well, why? What is it that you want? And my daughter has a performative side to her. She likes to, be in front of an audience at times, but she's also can be shy so I think what she found was an opportunity to take the spotlight, and so I was like, so why would we take the spotlight? Let's think about what it is that we'd want to do. And and she loves to dance. She loves to be, tumbling and gymnastics. And so I'm like, let's commit to the joy of the practice, and then the fame might come out of it. But if it doesn't, it's all right. You'll probably recognize it, you know, especially, in my industry, fame doesn't happen very often in the creative writing world. And so we're often putting ourselves in situations where we make choices that, and when I say we, like writers, teachers, individuals in the literary industry, we're making choices that don't bring a lot of money to us. They don't bring a lot of fame. And so we do them because of a real burning desire.
Yeah, no, I love that. I do want to talk about the evolution of the services, right? When you
Okay.
took over, because you've had to pivot, you've been forced to
Yeah.
pivot, but talk about just pre-COVID, what were some of the services that were offered? And then we can talk kind of post-COVID too.
Okay. So I'll start pre-COVID and also include like when I took over the Writing Salon in 2016, teachers weren't even getting contracts. So it was a handshake operation. And I recognized in it, soon enough, I was like, I got to get contracts. I got to get this stuff going. And at the same time, I was expanding services. So one thing that I made sure to do was when Jane Underwood passed away, she was a poet also. And I was like, okay, we have to make sure that we have a Jane Underwood Poetry Prize. I just think let's remember her. And I'm happy to say the Jane Underwood Poetry Prize is now, it's been going strong since 2017, and we're open to submissions now and until December 1st. This is a way to get your work out there. So that was one thing that we did. Services also,
I love
we
that.
had
Yeah.
as services, when you talk about services, I could also look at when you look at our website there and you see the services, we also concretized and expanded our one-on-one services that we provided to writers. So they could have mentorships, more easily. It was just in the past, it was a little abstract how we worked with individuals when they'd come to our school. And I was like, oh, this is something we really need to concretize and make sure that there's a system in place for it. We also built out an event series that would allow, kind of regular readings. There's nothing up right now because we just had our reading. We don't have our fresh winter reading yet.
I was looking at the all classes. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, events. Yeah.
The next, what else we did was we made sure now if we get to COVID and then let me go to post COVID now because I think I've talked a lot about pre or maybe let me get to during COVID.
Yeah.
While we are in
So
COVID,
really
we had
quickly, Ben, so
remarkable.
pre-COVID, you kind of, I guess, created these pathways for people. Maybe it wasn't as clear, there wasn't as much of a system when someone came
Yeah,
in. And so someone comes in now, there's like these direct pathways and there's a system for what they get. Before it was probably maybe on feel, like someone would come in, maybe there wasn't a complete structured system or
right.
pathway. because Jane was probably just like intuitive. She knows, okay, you need this, and you kind of structured it so it made it easy for people to kind of look and see what bucket they fit into and kind of follow that path. So now COVID hits.
Well said, Jeremy. And COVID hits, and I also want to add that we've been running about when we're at our height, we were running about 150 classes a year. So it's a big operation. 400 students were coming through each season. So COVID hits, we're at our highest point ever, actually. Winter of 2020, when COVID hit, we'd had like 450 plus students coming through our school. We're, highest revenue. We've been actually increasing on average year over year 20% since I came in. So it's like 2016 to 2020. COVID hits and I was like, all right, what are we going to do? So we did the most nimble.
Everyone was thinking that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every industry was asking the same exact thing. What are we going to do? And as as nimbly as we could, we pivoted online across all classes and ran essentially all classes online for a period of time, about a couple of years until we could gradually move into San Francisco. We let go of our Berkeley location and we relied on classes like Daily Write Round Robin that protected us in those during those times when we anticipated a kind of a contraction. So the round robin is a class Jane designed 20 years ago. It's a class where it's hard to call it a class, but I'll put quotes around it. You have to write every day for a period of time, either 3 weeks, 6 weeks, or 8 weeks. You write from a prompt that the facilitator of the class will give to you. You have to set a timer for 12 minutes. You can't write any longer than 12 minutes.
Mm.
But you can't share more than 12 minutes. There's also a word limit that you can share. Then after you do that, you send it to a partner that you have, and the partner responds with only encouraging comments. You do the same for your partner. You respond to their write each day with encouraging comments. Each week, you get a new partner. There are other aspects to the class, but that's the core of it. Now, what people say about it is they say one person said this is an antidote for writer's block because the system that's been created around writing ensures that you're writing every day.
We need
You're
this at
doing
the top, man.
what's up?
I need that quote at the top here. Like,
How
if
creative
someone's
is this
looking
one?
at the video, we're looking at the round robins, like your antidote for writer's block. Anyways, keep going. I love
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I mean, I love this one from Dale Benson. By the way, Dale Benson had taken this class maybe 50 times.
Wow.
So what people were finding was that in some cases, it was the way they could write it all. It was their pathway to writing because the structure that was set up was so clear to them. It takes all the guesswork out of writing. You have to write. There's a set time when you're doing it. A lot of people would say, okay, I'm just going to write in the morning. They'd have their patterns. And you're also a part of a community. And that's the core of the writing salon, I think, is that we don't we know that writing can happen alone, and it often does. But what writers benefit from most is when they have an opportunity to share and get feedback, and especially with early drafts, encouraging feedback. Because then there's this loop that happens where it's like, all right, I can do this again tomorrow. I can do this again the next day. It's very hard to be a writer and experience the silence that happens afterwards. And so
So,
we're eradicating that silence.
so Ben, this sounds totally obvious when you say it, but you came up with it, and it's not obvious until it's created, right?
Right.
So it's what's interesting about it is how did you even come up with this? Because it wasn't there before, right?
Jane Underwood came up with it and created and designed it and did it. It was mailed initially. So if we look back 20 years, the round robin was an exchange of letters. And
Interesting.
what she recognized this takes a lot of the best features of the writing salon and drops it into a class. What she recognized was that writers aren't actually committing to the practice. That was a great concern for Jane. And she understood that one of that there are a lot of ways, like you could give them a daily prompt and sure, and they'll write every day, but if they don't have someone on the back end, they don't have a sense of community then. And so then they're just getting a daily prompt. So there are a lot of actually places you could go online and find tons of places to get a daily prompt for your writing practice. But the chances of actually sustaining a practice through that daily prompt isn't very high because there's not a way to integrate it with community. So what we did was Jane did, was she just said, okay, I'm gonna build that community element on the back end. You have a partner who's responding. It can only be encouraging. And it was fine-tuned over, this is part of the patience that maybe could be a theme of our session. The writing salon has experienced incremental growth year over year, and a lot of it was from just a total patience. There are not many writing schools like us that exist in the United States that are a for-profit model. In fact, we're one of the few, very few, who can do this and make profit. And the round robin is one of the reasons why we've been able to make profit.
What are
One of the,
people looking to get out of it, right? Because everyone has something different going in. Why do people want to, like, what are they trying to achieve for themselves?
there, there are a
Because people have
variety.
gone through this, like you said, like 40 times or what, like that's a lot.
So for this particular class, everybody who takes this class is either loves writing or is on the cusp of loving it. And often taking it solidifies whatever joy they experience. It is pure pleasure. It's pure creativity. I'm a writer who goes through the full process from composing to proofreading at the very end. Much of my time is in editing and proofreading, which I have a lot of a passion for, but only a select group of people have a real passion for that stage of writing. But many people, and myself included, have a passion for that early part and are hungry for it, like that raw inspiration, that sense of anything's possible. And so we're tapping into that need for people. I think that a lot of people have, and maybe you have yourself, Jeremy. It's just desire, even with your science back, anything, your background that's different. Like you want to tell your story, you want your voice to get out there. This, it's a pleasurable experience doing that.
Yeah, I did a series where I had some of the top direct response marketers, copywriters on the planet on. And there was a bunch of them that said, what has helped me improve is a daily practice and some of them would actually just copy successful sales letters by hand. Like they don't even write anything. They just literally copy it by hand and by osmosis kind of learn what works. It's interesting, but it was a daily practice of doing it every single day. I'm curious on the pricing. How do you come up with the price? I mean, it's super affordable for anyone.
Yeah.
How do you determine pricing?
The pricing for round robin is different than for any other of our other classes because some people will come in and say this is a steal, and other people will come in and it is actually it truly is. But what people, if they haven't read the actual description, and this sometimes happens, but they're like, I'm not actually getting much instruction from Kathy Garlick, the facilitator. I'm not getting that direct instruction from a person, from an expert, teacher. I'm getting, feedback from peers. And and so we say we've essentially built out on the structure for you to be able to commit to your writing practice. And that is something that it has a
Different
value
outcome.
that has an absolute value. And like you're not here to necessarily publish a book. The people do use the round robin to complete books and have used it. And a woman, Susie Parker, early on, it's essentially use the writing, the round robin is a key way to get her work written. Many, I'd say dozens of books have probably come out of this class. So in terms of pricing it, we do have to make it friendly to the people who have taken it for a long time because we know they're going to be signing up again and again for it. So we want to go like we want our returners. There are are like they're the strength of our community. Uh, so whenever we do price increases, it's very gradual with round robin. And in fact, the Writing Salon has always, made a point of being accessible to everyone. So if you're looking around our website and you think of the Bay Area, our classes are very affordable generally across Bay Area, and even in comparison to other Bay Area schools. Um, that is essential for us. We also have an access program, which was something that I started shortly after. It took a little bit of time. It didn't really coalesce until 2020. But the access program was a way for people who don't have the capacity to pay for our classes to come in and benefit from the Writing Salon. This is something we're really proud of. Again, dozens, if not more than 100 people have come through our access program and been able to take classes here without perhaps having that opportunity otherwise. Before that, we had scholarship setups, but the access program really made it clear and accessible.
You were talking about books, Ben, so I'd
Yeah,
love for you to talk about Jingli.
Jing Li is a great story of an individual who came to San Francisco from China, grew up there, and she was, walking around a book fair in San Francisco at Fort Mason, that part of San Francisco, and came upon a booth that was a writing salon booth. This was back in the days of Jane Underwood. And at that booth, there's these words like anybody can write, right? Like anybody can do this. And she went up to Jane, the director, and she's like, "Is this even accessible to me? Can I do this? I speak English as a second language. Uh, can I do this?" And Jane's like, "Of course, come on in. This is it's for everyone." Jing Li ended up taking multiple classes at the Writing Salon and published her memoir, The Red Sandals, after all those classes. And what she said she wanted to do was, obtain a sense of like self-worth over time. She said that like it had been hard, to come here from China and to feel like she wanted to have a sense of accomplishment somewhere and to get her story out, have her voice be heard. And this was her opportunity to do it. And so we're so proud of Jane. This is one story from the Writing Salon, but students will come here and be working in a second language and have a lot of success like her.
I'm gonna, Ben, we were talking about post-pandemic, right?
Yeah,
And so one of the pieces, one of the parts of your website that I was on was the all classes, right? And so there is kind of intermixed different things, obviously from online to in person to kind of hybrid, asynchronous to. So you want to talk through just a few of the current items that we're looking at here?
sure. Round robin is its own class, so we separate that off. We think of it as a generative writing class where people can produce a lot of material. That happens entirely remotely and asynchronous. Uh, there are spin-offs of the round robin that are remote and synchronous. But then for the most part, when we're online, we're working with Zoom, live video conferencing. Uh, Probably about half of our classes take place online by Zoom. Uh, Then there are classes that are on a platform called Wet Ink that's specifically for writers. It's an asynchronous class that allows writers to work according to their own flexible schedule and still commit to a class. It's great opportunities there. And then
What are
we have
some of
our
the popular
in-person
asynchronous ones?
the creative writing workshops, the big seller where, it sells out most of the time. It also, we have to cap them at 10 because there's a lot of work for the instructor in those classes because those classes are designed to be essentially a place where students will come and polish their work. And so they're getting peer feedback and instructor feedback. And it's really, kind of focused critique there. Um, Another type of class is San Francisco class, where people come in person, and we have a lot of offerings in person. That is the direction we're headed more right now in terms of expansion. As we speak, there's actually a couple things in the works that we can talk about if we want to, around how the Writing Salon envisions itself, into the next year in
That is
2025.
interesting, Ben, you say that because the way I'm thinking, okay, COVID hits, you go a lot online, and I found certain companies just kind of keep going down that path. And you're saying, actually, our growth is going to come with in person.
I want to, I'd love to talk about this.
Yeah.
What we found is that our what our community coalesces around our in-person classes in a way that is like most dear to us. It is also aligned with the students' values. There's something about that connection that happens in an in-person setting that's very hard to replicate on Zoom or otherwise. So we love the accessibility and convenience of Zoom and remote asynchronous classes, but we also believe that our some of the best opportunities that we have for connections are available to us in person. And in fact, a lot of us just frankly miss that in-person connection. And so coming out of the pandemic, people are still in 2024, people come to us and take classes for the first time. And like, I forgot what this was like. I haven't taken a class in person in 5 years. Now I know what I've been missing, and they're just hungry for more. So we're recognizing that our Berkeley students really want Berkeley. They're like, oh, we want to be in Berkeley. We don't want to drive across the bridge to San Francisco. So we're sensing a need very clearly in our community to set the groundwork for
I was
resident.
listening to been a talk on this person who was an expert on AI, and one of the things that he was talking about is what will AI not replace, which I thought was an interesting question. And that was one of those things, is what you're talking about. It's that kind of that connection, that people connection, right?
Yeah.
He was talking about robots, autonomous vehicles, all this stuff, but that was an interesting question that was kind of posed. So I can see that.
What's interesting,
Yeah.
Jeremy, to spin off of that too, is that like our school has grown the most by in two ways. There are two ways that we grow. Word of mouth is so key to our school. And then retention of student, that's different from word of mouth. Retention of student primarily through direct engagement, such as email campaigns that are coming from us. So, so we know that actually that growth that we're looking for happens best through our in-person classes, through round robin, and through our more intimate online classes. There's another intimate online class that I want to point out, which is mentorships that we offer, and they're often in poetry, where it's one-on-one and it's online, but it's a replicating an experience that one might have in a low residency MFA program where you're sharing work with an instructor, but you're also writing letters to that teacher. And so there's this exchange that happens that's really intimate and meaningful, and people just take that over and over again because it's intoxicating to have that kind of personal relationship with an acclaimed author.
One that sticks out to me, I don't know why, it just does. I wonder if it's popular, is the story mapping one.
Yeah,
That one looks really cool because I feel like it's, first of all, if you're not looking at the screen, you're listening, it says, got an idea for a novel, a movie, or TV series. I mean, how many times have you heard someone like, I have this movie that I want to write? So I don't know. Is this one a popular one or?
absolutely. Good call, good call, Jared. Yeah, it's very popular story mapping, and Kate Montgomery, who teaches this class, has a screenwriting background, and story mapping is one that can also bring all genres together, most genres. So screenwriters will come in, fiction writers, so novelists might come in as well. And then, and there are times people working on a memoir, well, they'll come in and just think like, how do I actually structure this thing? It's kind of hard. I've got all these experiences. So, but it's primarily fiction and screenwriting. And yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be in the mode of watching your idea unfold. And I think what we find happens sometimes is that our students can stop at well, when they come to us, they have the idea, and we just don't want them to stop at the idea. And so this is one of the best next steps to allow that idea become a reality. But writing the story is really, really hard because it takes a lot of patience, a lot of commitment and effort. And so if you have the blueprint, for many people, like a story map, you're more likely to be able to do it eventually.
Yeah. I'm curious, you mentioned of, obviously word of mouth, but early on, is there some evolution from the marketing perspective? There's flyers early on, neon flyers. And then you said, obviously you do email marketing and other things. Are there any other methods you use to just get the word out?
Yeah, I mean, we are committed to approaches that include, I mean, there is a social media touch, but I want to be clear that we've recognized our capacity on social media, and we haven't I don't think that a lot of our best accomplishments in the marketing sphere have come through social media campaigns. And some of it has to do with a gateway problem. We don't have a lot of resources. We don't have a lot of income that we can bring to marketing. And marketing is a science. It takes a lot of work to go through the data and also build the campaigns that are really appropriate and beautiful. And we've had our beautiful campaigns. We know when they work. A lot of what we do um, is more like we'll build an event and we'll build a campaign around an event. So like our 20th anniversary event 5 years ago, the just building momentum towards events is exciting for folks. And you say, hey, come to our event. We'll do like a raffle or whatever, and you'll be able to get a free class out of it. We just did a bingo bash at our 25th anniversary event a month ago, or several weeks ago, where we said, hey, let's like winners of bingo. We'd never done this before. We just experimented. You're going to listen to a reading right now. You're going to hear some words. Fill out your bingo chart as you hear any of those phrases, words. Maybe you'll be the winner and you can get 25% off a class on our 25th anniversary year. And so we do stuff like that. That's fun, fun for us and isn't quite as data driven. Yeah, and we also we build connections with our local writers. I mean, I think that's so important for us. So, whether we're at reading series, our teachers are connecting with their students and other writers. We're taking a more personalized approach. We just haven't been able to do that as much in like social media or other marketing methods with a very personalized approach. One-on-one, like the best way actually to get signups we found, and when I was a teacher, I was doing this. I just email that student that I think is the best candidate. I love that about the writing salon, that it's so personalized like that.
What's interesting, I love that idea around building a campaign around an event. And I think anyone could do that. And that's again, it also builds just a deeper connection when you're in person. And also, I didn't think of what you just said, which is teachers, right? These teachers are maybe teaching in other places, maybe they're doing other things, and they're probably spreading the word. So you kind of have a fleet of these teachers out in the universe going back and going, oh, I also teach here. You should take the storytelling class or whatever. So there is that inherent word of mouth because of the community of the teachers too, right?
Right. And I want to speak about that relationship with teachers because this is crucial. Many of our teachers have been at the writing salon for a decade or more. This is unusual. I mean, I think in a lot of workplace settings, but also in the literary industry where there's a lot of turnover and there's also a lot of burnout. Um, the art teachers, so they've been around for a long time, and so they also feel a sense of commitment, though it's not where they're like, oh, I have to do this. It's they've recognized over time like this works for me and for the writing salon to be out there and getting the word out. So we cherish them. They're almost an interesting breed because they're somewhere in between an independent contractor and employee. They're like they exist in this nebulous realm between the two.
They're kind of like family, I guess, after 10 years, right?
And that's
Yeah.
yeah, from a personal standpoint. They are
Ben,
like,
go ahead.
yeah.
Are there certain things you do with the culture of the teachers? Like, I know we talked about building an event, and that's kind of for the students. What kind of stuff do you do for the staff or the teachers? Are there any certain events or things you do just to maintain culture with the team?
Yeah, we have teachers gatherings that we'll set up, and those will be a mix of opportunities to connect with each other and also have trainings. At times, the trainings might be more recently, trainings around, access, like how do we make our class accessible and equitable. There are times when we have to think about, what kind of is there a sense of fairness with how we're offering feedback to students, and that goes a long way. So the teachers' gatherings are special, but they were hard during the pandemic. I mean, we were kind of checking in over Zoom, and in other areas of the country, we may have listeners who are coming in from all over the country. In the Bay Area, we were experiencing a lockdown a little more intensely, I think, than other areas. And so when we would come together on Zoom for a long time, and it wasn't until like last year, 2023, that we could re-engage in a way that felt very personal in person with our teachers. So the touch was different, I have to say. It was hard for them and for us, especially from like 2021 to 20 early 2023, to feel as connected as we used to. Because before that, they were like moving, when we'd move into a new location, the teachers would be in moving with us, giving a helping. It was all hands. And also, we'd compensate when we felt it was appropriate, but there were times when they just wanted to, help out. And that's what I would do when I was a teacher too at the Writing Salon.
Ben, I have one last question for you.
Mhm.
Before I ask it, I just want to thank you for this. I've been excited for this for a long time. Well, and so I want to encourage everyone to check out writingsalons.com to learn more. Obviously, if you're in the Bay Area, but they do have online classes also. They're asynchronous or with a group. So check it out. Um, I have a really hard question for you. Okay. Um, your favorite books, okay? And it could be genres, right? Fiction, nonfiction, maybe business leadership. I'm curious, what are some of your favorite books?
Okay. Um, I want to start with like just poets, because I read a lot of poetry, and so I'll talk about poets. I mean, it all started for me with John Keats, so I have to, shout out to the romantic poet John Keats, who wrote all those beautiful odes. So if you're gonna go out there and pick up anyone from long distant past, check out John Keats. But other poets who I admire, and books that I've loved include well, most recently, I want to bring it more recent, Jeremy. I loved Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. It's just a beautiful book, and he's a poet who came to to the novel writing, and just produced this gorgeous book this year. So I celebrate that one. It's a great book. Um, Other like just poets that I've admired, because I want to with poetry, we don't know. I kind of think about the whole work. Elizabeth Bishop, someone who's been important to me, but more recent poets who I admire, living, Rick Barrett, who's a teacher of mine, and beautiful writer, just put out "Moving the Bones," so that's his latest. Also, really admire Rowan Ricardo Phillips. He's doing some very cool things with a sort of um, a line that feels very classical and graceful. Rowan Ricardo Phillips has a new book called Silver. That's wonderful. So those are some. The favorite books one, that's a one way in for me is to look very recent and then to the very distant past.
Any others as you're running the business, right? I know
Sure.
from a craft perspective, have probably that's why I figured it'd be a very difficult question to answer because you have a lot of favorite books, I'm sure. Um, so you have the craft side, and then what about just from as you're, like you're doing all these things like building teams and running the business and those kind of things. I don't know if there's any on that side.
I like Outliers, right? By like Malcolm Gladwell, like stuff like that allows an opportunity to think about why things happen on margins. And I also appreciate books that are kind of more religious oriented for business purposes. So one book that comes to mind is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind that, my dad introduced me to when I was young. It's by Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. That's one where I think with business leadership, a lot of the important work that we do is actually internalizing, reflecting, taking those moments to think about why we're going to make a decision, and then of course executing afterwards. But those I care about those moments of contemplation before execution, and that kind of book helps. It of course it talks about Zen practice, but it also allows you to think about how to speak carefully with others.
I
Um,
wonder, I haven't checked this
with
out.
intention.
Go ahead. What were you
Yeah.
gonna say?
Like and to kind of lead with intentionality.
I wasn't, I should have looked that up. I wonder, does your dad have like a recommended reading list or did he give you one growing up?
He recommends, it'll go back to like the Bible that as a just a touchstone starting point. Um, he also just gave his grandson um, a, a a Bible and reading Genesis, which is a book called from Marilyn Robinson. Um, but he recommends Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. Yeah, his work in Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. He brought that to me. Um, Opening the Hand of Thought is also another book that he's really appreciated. Um, his reading list, he would give reading books to his players. I mean, maybe you may recall that, and it varied widely what he would give. So you know he's he's got his joys.
And it'll
Yeah.
say Sacred Hoops too, or his,
I actually read Sacred Hoops recently. I hadn't read it before, just to be honest. Um, and Sacred Hoops
shame
was
on
one,
you. I think I read it in high school or whatever. I forgot when he came out with it, but yeah.
and Sacred Hoops was actually also very helpful from a business standpoint too, from leading a team. So I appreciated Sacred Hoops.
Um, you mentioned Malcolm Gladwell. I love his stuff. I just listened to Revenge of the Tipping Point, which is his kind of,
Hmm.
it's not really a remake because it's a totally different, different stories in it than the original Tipping Point, but it was fantastic as well. Um, I forgot to ask all the Michael Jordan stories. You have a Michael Jordan story.
I mean, yeah, I do. I guess they're one of my. I mean, I just go back to the first time I saw MJ play live, which was in 1987. And it was before my dad was coaching the Bulls. So I had no idea that he would actually be involved with the organization at that time. We went to the Boston Garden. So we lived in New York at the time, in Woodstock, New York. Went to the Boston Garden, then it's a funny story. My we went to eat right next to the garden, and my dad pulls out a paper and he goes, "Uh-oh." He's just like looks disappointed. I'm like, "What's up, Dad?" And he shows me Michael's stat line from the game the previous night. They played against the Hawks, and Michael had put down 61 points the day before, right? So it's like, don't like just be careful with your expectations today. He just
Your
had a
dad
huge
wants to Knicks to
night.
win, of course.
So
Yeah.
we go into the garden, and Michael had 17 points. It was probably one of his like kind of lowest point total of maybe lowest point totals of the season, but he was visibly, I mean, he's a superhuman, but he was also visibly exhausted from the prior night's work. So he didn't get as much playing time. But what happened after the game is also really special. I mean, this was something that I just really admired about Michael Jordan. it's like after the game, we waited to go see him and perhaps meet him and get his autograph. So kind of I'm waiting along in this tunnel with my mom. It's just the two of us. And he comes out and my mom approaches him and I'm sort of standing back a little bit. And she's like, "Can we have your autograph?" And and he's like, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I have to catch the bus." But he was but it wasn't like, didn't feel like at all like, I'm actually didn't feel like he neglected anything. He was the kindest individual to her. He was just so respectful and calling her ma'am. Like I hadn't heard anyone really call my mom ma'am. So I just appreciated that, the way he approached my mother. I thought it was very gentlemanly. And after that day, I just I have many memories of Michael Jordan, but that first one of his kindness is just so dear to me because I've seen Michael, like competitive to a point where he's raging and like very intense. And I loved that moment of like just the softer Michael too. Yeah.
I love that. Ben, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out writingsalons.com and more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.